Joining us right now from the Texas Tribune, it's Patrick Svitek. Patrick, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Chad. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it as always. Let's start off talking a little bit about the Texas House, finally getting some movement out of the Texas House. People were wondering when things were going to move, and we got committee assignments yesterday. What did you take away? What's some of the chatter that you're hearing about the committee assignments? Any surprises and any hidden or not so hidden meanings?
Yeah, there was certainly some shuffling, as you would expect, with members coming and going, and certain people who've left due to, Texas House members who are chairing committees for the first time this session, while 11 returning chairs are now leading new committees. I think one of the subjects of speculation was who was going to lead that appropriations committee. That's the powerful committee that's involved in budget planning. The former Otto retired after the last session, and we learned yesterday that John Zerwas is going to replace him. That's obviously going to be an important committee as lawmakers, work through this very tight fiscal picture that they're working with this session. Another committee where there was a lot of interest, as always, actually, is the Public Education Committee. Jimmy Don Aycock, no longer in the legislature. He's now being replaced by Dan Huberty, Republican from Houston. And so I think those were the two committees where there was quite a bit of focus just because of the very important issues they deal with every session, but especially this session.
Well, when you look at appropriations, and there's going to be, I think there's going to be a big budget battle ahead, because when I had the lieutenant governor on the show, it just seemed like he wasn't budging, and that their budget is their budget, and the House, they've got to do a lot of cutting, and I don't think House members are that keen on cutting right now.
I don't think so. I mean, it's very true that their budget plans are not identical. And as you had the lieutenant governor on your program, I think a few weeks ago, and he had some pretty critical words for the House budget. And so I think there's gonna have to be a real effort to reconcile the two spending plans that the chambers have put out in a way that is, obviously palatable to their members, but also palatable to the governor, who has put out his own budget proposal. It's obviously not necessarily a legislative proposal, but he put out a budget proposal that was, on the big issues, kind of more in line with the Senate's than the House's. So you're right. There's going to be a lot of tension there, and that's why it's, important. That's why it's closely watched who's going to lead that panel in the House.
Let's see. Sanctuary cities got moved out of the Senate this week. It's heading to the House, where there's really no specific timeline, is there, for sanctuary cities?
Yeah, not right now in the House, but, as we've talked about repeatedly, a lot of political momentum behind this. I imagine it's not going to move as quickly through the House as it did through the Senate. But, this gave, the fact that it passed out of the Senate this week, it gave the governor and lieutenant governor kind of an early political win. It was a predictable political win, but it was nonetheless a political win. And so, that's, I think, where that stands right now. But you're right. There is not a lot of clarity right now about how this is going to work its way through the House.
Is there chatter, with House members that they're not as keen on this as members of the Senate were? Is there just, is this something that maybe under Joe Strauss, that it's just not an emergency item for him? Is it a worry about business and other issues? I mean, we do see that popping up, like in the case of the bathroom bill.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's any chatter, it's that we're not going to, from House members, it's that we're not going to, this thing is not going to speed through the House the way it did speed through the Senate. I think they're going to, they're prideful in the fact, I think, that they're going to take a more deliberative approach to this, even if they end up passing some form of it. I think they want to, be seen as maybe dealing with more of the, some of the nuance that may have gotten, kind of steamrolled over in the Senate, just given the fast track it was on there. And I think that's also just a function of the institution, obviously, a larger, more deliberative body in some ways.
How much are egos to play between House members and the Senate? It just, it just seems like with, Lieutenant Governor Patrick and the lieutenant governor kind of calling out the House, and the Senate members calling out the House members, saying, you guys aren't conservative enough, you guys aren't as conservative as we are. It seems like there are a lot of egos at play here, and that the House members want to just have a little bit of independence away from the Senate.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you pointed out, I mean, we've known these tensions have existed between the two chambers for a while, but I think we've seen the lieutenant governor kind of make them known publicly this in a way this early on in the session that we maybe didn't see last session. You know, he's talked very bluntly about House resistance to school choice. He's talked about the very sharply, as we talked about earlier, the differences between the two budget proposals. And, you know, there's obviously always potential for that to backfire. I think House members on the whole don't like being told by the other chamber what to do, even if it's from the top of that chamber. So yeah. I think that, sometimes that bully pulpit approach works, but I think sometimes it could backfire as well.
Visit with Patrick Svitek. Patrick, you wrote along with Abby Livingston an interesting piece that was published last night on the Texas Tribune's website. Texas Democrats begin to plot out strategy for 2018 in the midterms. What's their strategy for Texas Democrats? What kind of strategy are they trying here?
With Donald Trump all over again. They're hopeful that based on they're cautiously optimistic, I'd say, that based on the way the Donald Trump presidency has started, and when you combine that with the gains that they made at the state level in 2016, especially in the urban areas, that there could be, a variety of factors that lead them to have some midterm wins in 2018. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily bullish about their chances, but they're hopeful given the national environment and given some of the, continued demographic advantages that they've built in Texas, that could come to a head in 2018. It's very, very early, and I think that what you saw in that story was that, they're already trying to, sort through who's going to run for what and kind of really formalize that strategy. In that story, there's a meeting that we report on that took place in late January in Austin. A lot of top Texas Democrats came to the capital city and, tried to, plot out just exactly what that strategy would be. So I'd say it's all in the preliminary stages, but, I'd also say that Trump is kind of factoring prominently into it.
Yeah, well, and like you said, 2018 is far away, but we're going to have people start. At least, they're already dancing. Some of these elected officials and non-elected officials, they're already dancing around it and seeing what they can do. Hey, what's the latest going on with Ken Paxton?
Sure. So, big development this week, just yesterday actually, was that the special prosecutors handling that state criminal securities fraud case against him want a change in venue. They want the case moved out of Collin County. That's Ken Paxton's home county. That's where he maintains a lot of not only personal connections but political connections. And the reason they cite is that Ken Paxton's team, they say, has waged what they called a 22-month siege on a lot of people involved in the case, trying to tilt public opinion in their favor. And they're arguing that as a result of that alleged crusade by Team Paxton, that they can't get a fair shake in Collin County. They didn't specify where they want the trial or the case moved to, but they did say they want it out of Collin County. And, this is, there's obviously a kind of timing factor here because Paxton is set to go to trial in this case in Collin County on May 1st. And there's a pretrial hearing just next week in Collin County. So this is kind of, could be a tight timeline and could cast some doubt over that schedule.
Yeah. Any word on which way they may lean? Who is viewed more favorably in that one?
I don't know honestly, and I'm happy to play political pundit, but I never know exactly how these legal developments are going to go. But the special prosecutors throughout this case have been very aggressive, very spirited, and they are I think that this filing yesterday you saw where they requested a change in venue was a culmination of frustrations they've had with a similarly aggressive and spirited, team on the other side from Ken Paxton. There's just been a lot going on to try to discredit this case on both sides, and so I think it's just a really kind of escalation in those frustrations.
Patrick, what are we looking ahead for next week down in the legislature, and what are some of the stories I know that you're going to be working on that people can read on TexasTribune.org?
Yeah, next week, now that we have House committees, I imagine that there's going to be some action in the House. As you pointed out, things are pretty quiet there this week in the absence of committees, so committees can actually start working and legislation can start moving through the House in earnest next week. So I think that that's going to be the big picture thing to watch. And then, like I said, next week I'm focused on, there's this pretrial hearing in Collin County involving Ken Paxton. It's going to be more closely watched than ever, given what we just discussed about the request for a change in venue. So that's kind of what's on my radar for now. But I'm sure as things go in Texas politics, there'll be plenty of unexpected developments next week.
It seems to pop up every now and then.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for your time. We'll visit with you next week. All right.
All right, have a good weekend.
You too. That's Patrick Svitek, Texas Tribune. You can go and see the stories that they've written over at texastribune.org.